Today, Dr. Teagarden, a professor at Kansas State University, will be sharing a story with us about his experiences in special education. First, here's a little background knowledge. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004 guarantees every child with a disability a free and appropriate public education, an appropriate evaluation by the school, an individualized education plan, being placed in the least restrictive environment, parental participation, and procedural safeguards. Prior to this act, the rights of special needs individuals were not clear and often their needs were not met. Today we'll be discussing special education with Dr. Teagarden, a teacher that taught special individuals prior to this act. Dr. Teagarden started working with special individuals at a 24/7 psych unit. His area of expertise was emotionally and behaviorally disturbed individuals. Dr. Teagarden began his journey into special education at Cap City Schools in Topeka, Kansas in 1982. Eventually, he was offered a job in Marysville, Kansas. He was asked to start a special education program. Dr. Teagarden will now share one of his success stories as a special educator.
What could Marysville, Kansas have to offer as far as challenging kids that I haven't already seen? So that's kind of the attitude I went in with, and I was wrong, really wrong, because it had the same kids. Because what I failed to realize is why they started that program is because those kiddos that I'd been working with in those other institutions were now being reintegrated, for better or worse, into their home communities. So the story I'll tell you is about Tommy. And Tommy was part of a brother and sister team that I inherited. They were picked up by the police. They'd been living for at least 3 months in trash bins. And the reason they didn't really have a clear timeline is because, unbeknownst to any of us at the time, Tommy's older brother actually murdered their parents and kicked them out, committed suicide. Long story, but basically Tommy and Frances, his sister, were child porn stars. Their parents supported their drug habit by doing child porn. Nobody ever told me about that, because so they were adopted by this foreign family, and Stan. It was a mountain of a man. If you were into Johnny Cash, he was, a big man. I can't remember the minor story, but he was kind of like that. And Stan saw the world in black and white. And so Stan said, by God, I'm just going to tell him how it's going to be. And that's the way it's going to be. And I wished him well. And so for about 5 or 6 years, Stan and I and Tommy and Frances all learned. And that's where I learned about their background. But one thing that Tommy wanted to be is a Marine. From the moment I saw him, that's what he wanted to be. And that is not a goal I would pick for anybody. It's one of those, been there, seen it, done it. There's better ways. But the one thing that hit me is it wasn't about me, it was about Tommy. So Tommy had talked to me about, he had this... he needed to have his supplies ready. So you can use that, how to organize and time management. And by then it dawned on me, one of the things the Marine Corps does do is they instill structure on you. It's not created structure that you or I might feel more comfortable. They impose it. And so, Tommy had come up with these things, and I'd use it in my kind of middle class going over here, but it also fit for that. Then apparently he realized that I had some psychodynamic background. I'd worked with shrinks, so he began to tell me about his dreams. And some of his dreams, and that's how I found out about how they ended up living in trash dumpsters. It was a dream, and then as we talked about it, it all came out, and it was all true. Mm-hmm. One of his dreams was he was in combat and he forgot his bullets. So you got to be planning, you got to do all this, So anyway, Tommy and I were together 6-7 years, and he moved on to secondary school. I kind of could touch base with him. He was in another town, but I kind of knew by that time Stan and Frances and Tommy, and I'm trying to think of the mother's name. She passed away soon after our reaction. But anyway, you know, we'd kind of formed this allegiance. So every once in a while we'd check in with each other how things are doing. And yeah, he was between the ditches. Still wanted to be a Marine. And then he graduated. And then he took the written test and failed. And then he took it again and failed. And then he took it again and failed. And on the fourth try, Tommy passed it by one question. And he became a Marine, which led to part of my legacy in Marysville, Kansas, a little town, 3,000 people. That part I knew. I knew Tommy had got in. That was all I knew. And a year or two went by, and one day I get this call from this secretary. It says, come to the office. Come right now. I said, okay. So I go down. There's these three young guys there. One of them is a captain in the Marine Corps. I know his costume. The other two, I'm having a hard time because they got earbuds in, and I don't think they're listening to their playlist. And they asked my name, and I said yes, and they whipped open their badges. And one was FBI, and the other was Secret Service. And I thought, oh God, this is not going to be a good day. What it really was, is it was a security check for Tommy. He had got to Hawaii and been assigned as a driver for a colonel. The colonel had nominated him for Eagle Watch. Eagle Watch is presidential protection, you know, the guy that stands way too straight and opens the door. So of course, when they started going through the paperwork, they found all of this stuff, child porn, you know, all of, you know, I mean, you don't go through a childhood like that without baggage.
Yeah.
But he passed his security check, and for 2 years held the door for the president. Still in the Marines. He's now married. The last time I saw him was when his mother passed away. You know, my definition of success would not be to be in the Marine Corps, because I like to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. And you don't, your career doesn't go real well in the Marine Corps if you do that. But it wasn't about me. It was about Tommy, and he knew something I didn't know. And the other thing was that I take with me from Tommy is, you know, if you'd have been a Benton person and you'd have learned the story, you know, oh God, you know, he can't read, you know, well, of course he can't read. He's been digging for garbage to stay alive, you know, most of his life. You would have bet against him. And so don't ever sell kids short.